Hello, hello, beloved listener, wherever you might be listening in your earbuds around the globe. This is Julie. I'm the host of the You-est You podcast, and I'm so grateful to be here with you and excited for you to be part of this conversation today. So, I just want to say that I'm actually recording this after my conversation with Allie, who's just an amazing woman. And I think this is one of those episodes. Get your pen, get your journal. You're going to want to reflect. We really hit on some important topics here. We talked about the need for women to be more supportive and loving of other women. We went way deep into that, as well as how to be loving and kind to our bodies, to stop pushing ourselves, and really looking for that signature energy of the divine, of God, of watching for when those doors open and then having the courage to walk through them. So, those are little high level highlights of the conversation. I think you're going to love this soulful chat that I had with Allie. Let me tell you about Allie Ware, my guest, who's become a dear, dear friend. Allie is a yoga teacher. She's a wife and mama of three amazing, joyful, and love-filled kids. She lives in the Maryland area as well. And what's so cool, Allie has lived many, many lives, from being an award-winning bridal hair stylist, and she talked all about that, and makeup artist. She is also a licensed hypnobirthing coach. She's a singer and songwriter. Like, what doesn't she do? And even did a short stint as a portrait artist. Allie is an obsessive soul searcher. She's a soul seeker, my friend, just like you and I. That's why I love having her here. And she has been practicing yoga for years. She's very big into journaling and reading the latest research on topics from childhood trauma, neurology, family, and wellness. So I found Allie teaching at the Lifetime near me in the Columbia, Maryland area. She teaches some of my favorite classes there. All the teachers are great. And she really, she loves to inspire others to take a moment to simply be. And in that, she often gets to share what she is learning and how to heal and practice with a somatic focus and from a trauma enforced place. So we dove all into that. And I just hope that this conversation, my friend, blesses you. I really do. I hope that you find wisdom and truth and gems that help you on your path of being your Youest You. So without further ado, I'm going to bring you right into this conversation, this beautiful, powerful, delicious conversation with my dear friend, Allie. And as always, thank you for being here. We love you. And I hope this helps you to be more of your Youest You. Yay. This is how we roll. This is so fun, Allie. I was like, we've got to just start recording because the two of us, I feel like the moment I met you when you were teaching yoga and I was nursing myself back to health in my back, literally my back to health. And I'm like, who is this magical fairy yoga teacher / like human being that I just love and adore? And
Aw.
you really, who you are, we're going to talk about this because I love, love, love you as a teacher, as a seeker. Like, you just have a lot of wisdom. And I was like, girl's got to be on the show. You got to share. But before we get into that, this is so funny. One of the things I remember, you were like, we connected because I think you had the Youest You intention cards, right? When we met, I think you had the cards. And so do you remember that you had the Youest You cards?
Oh,
That's how
yes. I was like, wait, there was like a pause. So yeah, I
yeah.
was like, wait, are you? Because I've had these. I got these actually when I finished my yoga program that you're now doing.
So funny.
And we went to that little vegan restaurant next to that store in Columbia, and I picked these up and I was like, I love this. And and then I would use them in my class for like theming because I was like, these are just so beautifully written. And then you were like, oh my gosh, those are mine. I was like, I feel like I was meeting a celebrity. So I was like, you met a fairy, I met a celebrity. I was very excited.
Oh my gosh. It was like kismet. It was kismet. And we're talking about, if you're listening, the Youest You intention cards. We're actually holding them up. If you're watching on YouTube,
And
you'll
they're
see them.
beautiful. They're so beautiful. They're
Aww.
such a good gift. They're so good to like have in your practice. Just I actually have book holder that I have next to my makeup stand. So
Oh,
it keeps, usually I would like keep a page open in a book, like if I'm doing something like that, but I have these resting there. So they're just always there no matter what I have going on that little book stand. They're on my book stand when I do my makeup every day. So,
oh my gosh, I'm so touched. This is the thing, and I'll say before we pick them, because I know so many of the listeners, like you, like me, are these very soulful, entrepreneurial minded, big hearted women, men too, but we have a lot of women out there that get that flair, that heart flare, as I call it, that it's like, I want to help people. And I have to say this because I remember when I wrote these, part of my brain, my little side of my brain that was like, who's going to read these? Who's going to like, why do this? And it was like, no, I'm doing this because if it's one person that it serves, it's worth it. And we'll talk about that, but I'm so grateful. It
just
really
putting it out there.
putting it out there. We're going to get into putting it out there. I think that's going to be one of the things that we get into. So I'm making sure. Can you hear me okay? I know it's
It
been
keeps like breaking up a little bit. So if I pause or I don't answer you, I'm waiting for it to like catch up. So I
it's
don't
all
know why.
good.
I
It's
don't know
all
why
good.
it's doing that. So I apologize.
No worries. We're going to roll with it. All right,
Okay.
Allie, so for you, our beloved listeners, we are going to pull a card for you. We're going to use the Youest You intention cards and pull a card and have fun with this. So I'm just going to shuffle and then you shuffle and we'll each pull a card and see what we
I
get.
already pulled my card. I'm like a jump the gun.
Oh, you got Okay. All right, sister, you go first. Go read your
I
card.
thought mine was so good because my
Oh.
card is contribution.
Oh, I love it. It goes with my card. Okay.
I was
Do you
like,
want to,
what's
just read?
happening?
Yeah, of
Yes.
course.
The declaration is I allow myself to be an inspiring and powerful example to myself and to others' lives. I contribute to the goodness of humanity by living my truth, being loving towards myself, and sharing that love with the planet. Ask the Youest You, how do I most want to contribute to the world? What is a small action I can take this morning to add this contribution? And why is contributing so important to me?
Oh my gosh.
So good.
I love it. This is what we were talking about. All right. And mine, which is totally connected, just show it, is presence.
Ah, perfect.
I know. I'm like, thank you, universe. Thank you, spirit, for guiding this. I was like, we're gonna pull some cards to see where we're going.
Yeah, this is great.
All right. The intention is as I increase my presence, I feel more present in all the gifts in my life. I am present to the miracle of being alive and well right now in this moment. I will pause throughout the day to bring a new sense of awareness to all that surrounds me. And then there's some questions. We'll come back to that. But I love these two intentions. And I feel like part of the gift with you and what you do and in your teaching and who you're being. And it's the reason I'm like, we've got to just have a convo. Because I know when we spoke last time, it was like 4 hours later. I'm like, I love this woman. Like she is seriously, you are so full of soul and wisdom and realness and heart. And that what you're doing, right? And I know you've had other entrepreneurial endeavors and we'll talk about that. But because you chose to kind of step into going into the yoga teacher training, that being a yoga teacher, that is contribution. And so much of what I get from you, who you are and your class and who you're being is presence of something greater, presence of our, the Youest You, our higher self of love. And so I love that these are the cards. How perfect.
Yeah, they are so perfect because I feel like what you offer and just like you're such a positive person and that was like one of the things that was so like when I met you, like you were like, you're such a light. And I'm like, I feel like you're such a light. It's so nice to be around someone who's so encouraging and so affirming. And I feel like you have been like, you're a little older than me. Like, it's nice to have women encouraging each other. Like so oftentimes, I mean, like that if there's another woman thriving, a lot of times other women feel threatened by that or jealous or these weird scenarios play out. And it was just so refreshing to talk to someone who is actually living out these things, accomplishing these things, doing these things, publishing, having a podcast. And then for you to like I felt like a little sister. Like I felt like immediately this like, hey, like you're right on the track. Like you're going places. I don't think I have ever had someone just outright say that in such an encouraging, genuine way. So yeah, our kid, like we have this mutual, like, I see something shiny. I see something shiny. Like
We all
I see you
find.
sparkle. Let's all sparkle together. And I just love that about you so, so, so much and so appreciate you. So thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, Allie. Thank you. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much. So I want to share with everyone because oftentimes I'll have like an idea of where we're going. And I've had a couple thoughts and we did a little intention before we bring in the divine. I know I did that before. Like, please let this conversation be a blessing and bless everybody. That is
Mm-hmm.
always the underlying, woo, got chills
Yeah.
with that. My heart's like, woo. And here's what I want to say is as you were speaking, one of the things I think I'd really love to talk about, and you brought it and it just lit up, is this idea of women, especially encouraging other women and changing the whole way that we operate to, as individuals, but encouraging. So I want to come back to that because there's something there that I think
Mm-hmm.
is really being asked for. And it's something that you really do beautifully. And for those that are listening, we have listeners all over the globe. We are in this little corner of Maryland in the United States. And
Thank
I
you.
met Allie because I'm a huge fan. I've been going to Lifetime. For those of you who've been in this podcast community, Baram Akradi, I interviewed the CEO of Lifetime a couple years ago. It's been a really beautiful, it's just a great community. It's a gym, but
Yeah. It's an amazing, amazing place. Super unique,
amazing.
super special. Hasn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
The yoga program, I was like, I'd gone to a lot of yoga studios before and I found myself back in getting into yoga. And I've been really inspired and amazed with everyone. And your presence, your contribution are two intentions. I mean, right away. Something that I know you've talked a lot about, and maybe we'll go back to a little bit of your background because for those that don't know you yet, but one of the things I want to touch upon is this idea of really loving and accepting you and your body where you are
Mm.
right now, and I'm saying this for all of those who are healing
Yeah.
from being shitty to yourself with body image, with trying to push yourself into poses. Maybe you also do yoga. Maybe it's whatever it is you're doing. That's actually how my injury, my messenger happened, was pushing and over striving. And you have a way, you practice this, you live this, you breathe this. But I also want to talk about that as well, how
Yeah.
to really shift the way we talk to ourselves and to our bodies and just loving where we are and being in that presence. So I'm just putting a pin in that. We're going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big one. Like we could spend the whole time unpacking that because that's
Yes.
kind of
And
what led me here. So yeah.
yeah, I have a feeling it's going to also connect to women, encouraging women, where I see a
Yeah.
thread. Let's go to like wherever you want to pick it up, Allie, because I know like you could tell your whole life story and we might have like
Yeah.
10 hours, but you have an amazing background. And, I just want everyone to know, you probably heard in the bio. I mean, you've been an award-winning hairstylist for brides and individuals. And like you've built, successful businesses, you've done
Yeah.
hypnobirthing and all kinds of incredible ways of being of service. Let's go, you pick it up where you want as it relates to, it could be about body, around business. You
Yeah.
give it to you.
Um, I think so. I guess I'll pick it up with the hypnobirthing. I mean, the bridal industry was wonderful. I did that. That kind of just like that just happened. Like it just opened.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who is a firm believer in the Lord and like how he just like opens doors. And it was my first business. It was like the doors just opened and it just
Mm.
happened. And I just so happened to have a business degree and I felt the confidence to run that business. And people always say, "Oh, brides, like that's so hard." And I mean, I really can't. I can handle anybody. Like I love everybody. Like everyone has a story to tell. So I never felt that way about working in bridal. For me, it was just more once I started my family, it was the hours and things like that. So that kind of went to the wayside. But I had spent years building this business. And I knew I needed to, I couldn't keep striving. I couldn't keep pushing standing for 8 hours a day and eating once, going to the bathroom once. And sometimes I was also nursing. So I was pumping. I'd pump one time and I would leave these amazing, it's such a blessing. Something we talk about in the hair industry is like, we are one of the few service industries that get to touch people. And so it's like, people just felt very safe. Like it was just such an honor to be able to be a part of this like very sacred day for so many women. And I truly, truly loved it. But my body could not handle it. Like I would get in the car at the end of working and it was like, I was so disassociated from what was happening in my body, from the adrenaline. And, they say, you love your job when time flies. Well, time would just fly. And then I'd get into my car and there would be some days where I'd just start crying because I was in so much physical pain from being hungry, from standing for 8 hours. And so that chapter had to end. But I will say I was in my mid-20s and building something and then having to step away from it because I wanted to be home to raise my babies and to also be a part of our family life. It was really challenging. That was not an easy thing to do. It was, lots of tears, lots of doubt. But then I felt like God was kind of saying to me at that time, like, you have your whole life ahead. And if you're meant to come back to this, I'll bring you back. And little did I know then where everything was going to go. So I kind of step away from that world, just do here and there. And then I am searching for something to kind of put my energy into. And I found, hypnobirthing was actually something that, again, put in my ear before I even had kids. And it was the methodology I used for my first daughter when she was, when I was in labor with her. I had a 28-hour labor and I used hypnobirthing. I was at home for 24 of those hours and I was pretty much, I was hypnotized. I was so deeply relaxed for hours on end. It was an amazing experience. Had a really great, easy birth, delivery once she actually came, and that was great. I had a very quick recovery, which was amazing, because I was able to deliver naturally. But there's a lot on that. So then I actually started getting into that world after my second child was born. And that's a really heavy, big beast, the birthing world. It's something that it was kind of like I was rebuilding a business and I didn't realize I was going to have to do that with this certification. I thought there would be kind of more, I'd be just taking clients, and that wasn't really happening. It was a lot more footwork and a lot more things that I just couldn't handle at that time. And then also kind of fighting the man, so to speak. These patterns of what we say in the hypnosis world is like, we're all kind of hypnotized to this way that we do things. The analogy I would give clients when I was teaching, so I was a birth educator. I was not a doula. I was a birth educator. I would say it was like we were on a conveyor belt. And as soon as you got pregnant, you felt like you were on a conveyor belt and you couldn't jump off. That's just not the case. You can jump off. You can go a different way. You can choose different things. But there was a piece of that felt like, I am someone who's deeply committed to justice and I'm a big fighter. But at the time and season of my life, it was a fight I couldn't fight. I couldn't give that energy to fight literally our hospital systems, educate our doctors. After I gave birth to my second child, my third, I was using a midwife practice in Northern Virginia. And a couple months later, I heard they were connected to the hospital. The birthing center shut down at that hospital. The midwives, they left the practice. So there's a lot going on in that industry. And yes, it is an industry, sadly, that is just very heavy. And we need women. We need voices. We need to be fighting that fight. But I couldn't fight for that. I was fighting for my family. And I was fighting to also do something countercultural, especially for where I lived, which was I stayed at home and was raising my kids. So, keeping my head afloat to stay at home, and it was very isolating and lonely. There were just other things happening for me. So kind of stepped away from that. And also because after my third child was born, I had injuries from my delivery with him. I had great labor, no birth trauma, like with any of the three, really, really great labors. But because of my hypermobility, I ended up having a hip injury in my left hip that, and then nerve damage that was not really discovered until about a year ago. So he's 4 now. So not till he was 3 years old did I even figure out what was actually happening in my pelvis and all this stuff. So, I couldn't walk after I had him. So work, like it was, there was a lot going on in that transitional season. He was 1 when we moved to Maryland. And again, it was just one of those things where God kind of put it on my heart. I wasn't working again. I wanted something to do. And I had been practicing yoga since I was 15. And I just randomly looked up like lifetime yoga training. And it was happening in like a month. And I signed up and first of all, yoga training, that's a whole nother story with the opening the doors of that kind of thing. But it's like the timing was so perfect. The price was perfect. The schedule was so perfect for our family life. It was such an easeful program that with every step of the way, it just felt like I was right where I needed to be. So, that's how I ended up actually becoming a yoga teacher. So that's the long and short of how I ended up teaching at Lifetime. But there's way more to unpack with all that yoga stuff. So,
yeah. Oh, I want to point to one thing I heard you say a couple times. Like, thank you for sharing that, and a couple themes, because I'm listening and I'm like, oh my gosh, you can hear just your body speaking, right? When it was time to leave the bridal, hair industry, which, by the way, for all those who are watching, Allie has amazing hair. I just have to say, just have to say that you have awesome hair. I always am like, whatever you come in, I'm like, she's just no wonder, girl knows how to do her hair. Anyhow, but but listening to your body, like you didn't, you were aching. It was not feeling good anymore. Listening to your body after you had your third with your son, and realizing you gotta shift things up. Like, I hear a lot of trusting and listening to your body. I also hear a lot of trusting God, the divine Lord, right? Like really, and even in that, getting that signature, that divine signature, is those doors open with ease. There's an ease in there. There's
100%. There's no forcing with like a crowbar trying to get these things to happen.
Yes.
And so many times we're striving for those things. And, I will say every time I was scared, like when I stopped, like I had gone through all this hypnobirth training. I had done it. I loved teaching. I loved it. But there were things just that also, again, didn't feel right and felt very draining, that things weren't lining up. And then once again, walk away again, and then I go to my husband and I'm like, okay, I want to do this training. And he's like, great. Like, I'm so blessed to have a partner who like fully sees me and supports me, and also knows like I mean business, that I'm not just going to like squander these things, but yoga has been the thing that, I started doing yoga when I was 15. And that was, again, a God thing. Like, I went with, the story behind that is so funny. My best friend, Brittany, and I, Brittany Smith, who's also a yoga teacher in like Hawaii, and she's actually like an organizer and a life coach. She does all these things now. She worked at Sport Fit and Bowie, and she would like sneak me in. Like, so I took like 2 years of yoga classes as like a 16 and 17-year-old without paying. So I'm so sorry, Sport Fit and Bowie. I probably owe you some like back fees. And we'd go every Monday and Wednesday. And I actually don't even know what my instructor's name was. Like, if I could somehow find her. So this was like in 2003, 2004, 2005-ish. And it changed my life. Like, Brittany and I both grew up in, broken homes, a lot of just trauma for both of us. And it was a like divine intervention, finding yoga. And it was a 90-minute practice. And we'd go twice a week, we would go, and it was so healing. It just taught us how to connect and who I didn't even realize what it was doing in my brain then. Like, knowing what I know now, like when I did hypnobirthing, when I hypnotized myself, quote unquote, which we can discuss some of those terms and things like that. But with my first daughter, it was all yoga breathing. It was all the years of yoga training. There was no way I could have done that had it not been for yoga. And so that's the piece of it, that like this practice is so much bigger than just an hour at the gym. Like this is so much bigger than just like I've done CrossFit, I've done everything, I've done bar, I worked at Curves, I've done it all. I've done all of them. Yoga is so deeply communal and yet so deeply personal and spiritual. There is nothing that compares to it. And now science is catching up. Like now we have all these scientific studies and all these things. But when they first started studying it in the 80s, they couldn't even get funding to study it because it was the name, because it was too new agey. So, Dr. Ornish, who wrote the books on heart health and stuff, he was using yoga methods to help people heal their arteries in the 80s, but he had to call it something else. So it's just comical. Like now we can actually study it now, but even the studies, mindfulness or like there's all these different names it kind of has to fall under, when really the practice, an Ashtanga practice or even a yin practice, where you're just bringing breath, presence, body, you're bringing it all online to pause and be, that's where the healing takes place. It's not in the pushing. It's not in the stretching and getting stronger. Those things will happen. But where the healing takes place is the awareness and the bringing and the learning how to listen to what's the soundtrack going on in your head. And then there's no other workout where your instructor, your teacher is going to say, okay, what are your thoughts here as you're lifting 145 pounds or whatever. That's just not part of it. So yeah.
I thank you for sharing. And we will come back. I want to look at this hypnotizing and what that means. But I think what I know, and it to me, what's fantastic is to see yoga on such a rise. I mean, obviously we've been seeing that over the last decade or so. It's interesting. I had done it for a long time. I used it before giving birth. I wish I'd known you to do hypnobirthing, but that's a different story. Anyhow, it's funny. I'm imagining if you're listening, and no judgment. I just was in a stage, I remember, of like really got to push myself. I remember in the pandemic, during those times of being at home, I was like, okay, now I got to really like find things I can do because I'm not going to the gym. And I just got into this, like this mindset of pushing and I'm positive, I'm confident that
it's like an obsessive, it's like that Western conquering, something they say a lot of times in Lifetime is, the way, a lot of yoga teachers will say it, the way you do anything is how you do everything. And my third child, so probably my first 15 years of yoga, anytime I heard that phrase, what my Western brain would go was, yeah, I do it the best. Yeah. I do it the best. I do it the hardest. I don't give up. I push it is that pushing, even in yoga, that was there. Yeah. And it wasn't until my son where I was not supposed to even do a wide stance in a warrior. And I go to my first flow, which at Lifetime is this very intense, very fast paced class. And I put a bolster on my mat, which is like, you don't do that in flow, but I didn't care. And I just did what I could do. And the teacher said that in that class. She said, how you do anything is how you do everything. Yeah. And it was the first time I thought, I do everything with compassion. I do everything with gentleness. Yeah. And it was like that was my automatic response to what she was saying. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have been doing this in such a different way for 15 years because I was 15, I was 20. I could, hold every pose and go fast and get sweaty, and I could do those things. But what happens when our body needs rest? What happens when we're injured? What happens when we're pregnant? What happens when the scenery, the tides change? There has to be another dialogue. And the truth is that mentality, it's a very Western mentality around yoga.
Yes.
It's the conquering, the American dream, be better, do better. And we can't, there is nothing wrong. I mean, I love America. I love being an American. I'm grateful that we live in this country. And we cannot not be Western. So let's make that very clear.
Yeah.
Okay. As much as people want, like, we are a product of our culture, of our environment. That is something that is in us. However, we can acknowledge when we have maybe just, I don't know. I don't even know what to, like, it's like you can't help it, but there's other ways to do it too. We have to consider that there's another way as well.
Yes. I don't know if this is the right term, and I want to be careful how I use hypnotize, but I would say there is a general conditioning, right, in the Western mindset programming. And it tends to go like this, like you push, you strive, you achieve to get the success. I'm putting that in air quotes, success to be successful, to thrive. You have to push the hardest. You've got to compete and be the best. And I can tell you one of the gifts of having this back situation and just doing a lot of reflection, inner work, is I realized, first of all, my energy does not like that. My body, my sweet home that my soul is living in, the sweet home that all of your souls are living in, you got to ask, I'm going to guess my body does not like that. Does not like that kind of.
No, it can't. It's not meant to do that all the time.
No, not
that's
all the
the
time.
part is that. Yeah. So I was actually talking to one of my daughter's coaches about this exact issue, is that we see this happening in our kids, even like the hyper programming, the hyper training, and kids are getting injured younger and younger and younger in sports because there's no down season. There's no recovery built in. And so something that's very eye-opening, so let's just stay in the Western, like, all right, let's leave yoga out of it. If you look at, all right, you graduate high school, maybe you did a lot of sports growing up, like usually you kind of have a down season. Like back in the 90s, back in the 2000s, like you were like, okay, you were a soccer player, you had like some downtime, right? And then you go to college, maybe you play collegiately, maybe you don't. And then you become adult. And what happens is, okay, I'm going to start running half marathons because I ran all the time, right? So, but if you don't have a coaches, if you have a coach, if you have a mentor, these professional athletes that are in their 30s and 40s that are training, when you actually listen to what they do, they have a time of training, a time of recovery, and a time of rest. Then it's 3 cycles. And so we treat our bodies like we've treated kind of our minds. Like there's no cycle really in the American culture, right? It's just always growth mindset. Always grow, make more money, get the bigger house, you accumulate more. It's very attachment based. It's very consumeristic based. It's very success oriented. And then we also do the same thing to our bodies. Train harder, work harder, train during injuries. And there's even language in the CrossFit world and even, some of our, some classes where it's like, pain is the body getting stronger. That's just like such a lie.
Such a lie. Oh, yeah.
Such a lie. And we have to be thinking more about the seasons and the cycles, train, recover, rest, train, recover. And so that when your body needs to recover, you're letting it recover. When it needs to rest, you're letting it rest. And finding out ways in which in every exercise, whether it's yoga, whether it's CrossFit or cycling, if people don't believe me on this, really go listen to some interviews, go look at some training of these runners, cyclists. They will take weeks off in their rest period. Weeks they'll take, and then they start training again.
Yeah.
Because the body is not meant to be doing that at all times. And yet the average person, I know the average woman, she's at the gym, like the average healthy, fit woman, she's at the gym 6 times a week.
Yeah.
For an hour. Like it's too much. And I see a lot of my students, like I have some students who they will be at the gym for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And the question, that's where we have this like burnout, where we have higher rates of injury. We have to start to kind of like embrace the pause, embrace the rest, embrace that as part of growth, as part of the story.
I so love this. And what comes to mind to heart, first of all, I love when you tell that story of going to the flow, putting your bolster down on the mat and realizing you said to yourself, I do everything with compassion and gentleness. And I feel, as a high empath feeler, I'm like, that feels aligned. And, we could also pick this up from the thread of energy, right? Like masculine and feminine, meaning we have both and all.
Yeah.
With that masculine energy, which we tend to have a lot of hyper masculine energy in this part of the world. And I know those also joining us, wherever you are, there's a lot of focus in many parts of this Western world on the masculine, meaning the achieving, the striving, the conquering, the making it happen. And what I'm hearing, and it's one of the reasons yin yoga, which is, that time of rest, that feminine energy, that energy of being, of quiet, of going within, that
of nurturing,
nourishing, it's like we need both. We actually, like, nature has both at all times, both of these energies. One of the things I love when I'm in any of your classes is there's a lot of affirmation of both understanding we have what we need, and also do not compare yourself. This is, I actually think, one of the greatest pandemics going on is this comparison, this feeling not good enough, this pushing. I think it's a greater symptom of something deeper, which I know we've talked about at the deepest level, that your mantra that I stand for. I do everything with compassion and gentleness. And I think we're at a juncture where this is a time where we're starting to see it doesn't work. And it also leads to, even earlier, about women supporting other women. When you start to compare and feel like you're fighting for the spot or success, it's like you're coming from
there's
the
enough
zero
to go
sum.
around. It's a very scarcity mindset. And that's the thing. Like, I was watching this interview the other day. It was actually a YouTube video of this like auditing. He does like financial audits, and it's very convicting, by the way, if you want to check it out. It's, oh my gosh. But he's interviewing this girl, and she's a spiritual coach, and she talked about like, and she's just spending money. She's in so much debt. She's like, well, it's abundance mindset. And I was like, oh, actually, your consumerism, and I have this problem too. So this isn't, and this is how I am in class too. Anything I'm going to speak to is because I see it in my own soul. I see it as a reflection, which is actually you're coming from a scarcity mindset. When you're having to buy and gather and store up for the winter, it's actually fear-based. It's actually attachment. It's entitlement. It's like weird. It can be both and. You can have this entitlement and you can also have scarcity. So the scarcity mindset is playing into all the things you're talking about, right? Like our comparison, there's not enough to go around, not enough success to go around, not enough attention, not enough listeners, right? If we're talking about podcasts, not enough readers. It's just such a distraction, in my opinion, of people being able to, one, bring presence to themselves, two, then share their inner light, their story with other people. Like, it's a distraction. So in yoga, you'll hear me say, imagine Like you're blurring everything out around you.
Yeah.
You're not concerned about how you look. And we go there in our practice, right? We think about our belly. We think about, now I'm aging and I'm like, okay, you think about how your neck looks when you're, in your downward dog. It's like, that's ego creeping up, and we can notice those things. It's not that we pretend that we are some holier than thou, fully evolved person that doesn't think about those things. No, we do think about those things. So just notice, and notice your humanity in that. And then the big comparison thing that I like to address a lot is the whether it's injuries, whether it's social media. Like I have a love-hate relationship, like most of us do, with it, because there's a lot of really amazing things that come from it. But a lot of what we see in the yoga world is these the ideal forms, right? So when I was in France this past week, I went and took yoga. And frankly, like I'm a thicker girl, like I'm curvy, and like, I was I'm more of the Kim Kardashian body type, but when I was in high school during the, Kate Moss, like everyone was real thin. I was the biggest of all my friends. I was a size 8, and I was like, the fat friend, which is like so laughable.
Yeah.
I think about that, how sad. So I'm glad to see some of these things making it way to the mainstream. But I was thinking about going to yoga, and French women are very thin. And I had the thought, even as a teacher, even as a yoga student for 20 years, I was like, I'm going to be the biggest one there. And it almost kept me. And then I said, you know what? I could be the slowest. I could be the biggest, but that is not why I practice. I'm not practicing to show off. I'm not practicing to look like a yogi. I am rolling out my mat. I am coming together with community to share in this universal breath. And because yoga has become mainstream, and we've stripped it of a lot of the spiritual things, which I really try not to do in my class, that's what can creep up. A lot of that ego can creep up. And it keeps people. So I really do love, and I will say, give a shout out to Lifetime for this. And something that I really love is that you will see every age, every body type, every ethnicity represented in our classes. And we're also, shout out to Lifetime again, it's not an alignment-based thing. It's not an alignment-based practice. So the alignment, it's important. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is importance there, but it also can go into that comparison thing. When you're so hyper-focused on alignment, a lot of men, for example, we talk about women, but like a lot of men are deterred from alignment-based practices because their bodies physically do not go into those shapes.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there that I think that is important. But, I try when I'm creating my spaces for my students is like not to like harp on these things, but to bring it up enough that it is something that's being addressed and being like acknowledged. Bob, and who takes our class, he loves when I bring up the dancers, because all the Instagram things you see, they're all dancers. And I love that for them. Like it's great. Yeah. But it presents an image of yoga that's not real. Like that's not, when you look at a dancer that's been training since she was 6 years old, and she can go into a standing split, and she's, 120 pounds and 5'7", it does make people like, or even Instagram yoga teachers that are very popular, like versus like for me, like I'm 5'3" and I'm thick and I'm short, and, but it's like, I will even go into that space of like, well, I don't look like the average yoga teacher. So I bring that stuff to class because it's something that I personally struggle with too.
And this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring everything you're talking about here, because I know for you, beloved listener, wherever you're located, I know from hearing from you and just knowing what it's like to be a soulful seeker that's big-hearted, that's often highly sensitive and empathic. This often comes up what you're talking about, Allie, it comes up. And one of the most healing things that I've noticed for myself, which is why I'm like, wow, like it has been incredibly powerful for me in my healing journey, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, um, being in these classes, especially with you, and to decide that not only am I not going to I'm going to send love to everybody. I'm going to send love to myself. I'm going to honor my body to the positions and the movements and the postures that work. Some don't. And it's so beautiful because, and it's not that I don't sometimes get triggered, like, "Ooh, I wish I could look like that and do that." And then I'm like, Julie, all right, that's a gift. That's an area to bring in with love. But there's something very freeing that focus on that you said, that universal breath, the gift of life, the inspiration. We all have it. What I've
Like,
found is,
why are we actually here?
why are we
Why are we
here?
here?
That's
Why
right.
are
It
we
is.
practicing? Why
Yeah,
do we roll our mat out? Why are you drawn to yoga?
that's
Why do you keep
right.
coming back?
That's right.
And it's that universal prana, which means breath and spirit. We
Yeah.
all have a breath.
Yeah.
We all have a soul. And in that super simplicity,
Yeah.
we are connected.
Yes. That's so beautiful. And I think going back to what you said for, I always like to go to the deep end of the spiritual pool here. For me, connecting back into the divine God source, whatever you call that, for me, what I found is being able to connect into the divine in all of the, oh, I don't look like that, all the things that come up, / those moments of just great peace. And it has, it has shifted, it is shifting my consciousness and my connection to the greater, the greater divine power that's here for all of us, however you name that. And to each one of us being completely in this oneness together. It's it's a very big shift. And I think this is something, you've talked about being in that flow, doors opening. I think there's a real asking for being in that flow and being in that knowing that you are guided and protected and coming, getting that your breath, it's not just your breath because you want to, feel better. It's also, it's what sustains you, but it also connects us to each other. And, there's something greater going on here. It's one of the reasons, I mean, it's been such a gift. I mean, I still can't believe, I'm like, why am I doing teacher training? I have no idea. But when I met
I've
you,
convinced you. I
yeah,
convinced you.
Allie's like, you're doing this. You're doing this. And I'm not trying to convince anyone listening, although I will say there's so many great programs out there. Lifetime, though, the yoga teacher training is fantastic so far. I'm not that
so great. Yeah.
so great. You as now being in the season, your children a little bit older, you're teaching, you're living and breathing this. This is one of the things I love about you. You're so obviously in alignment with what you talk about and teach. You are living it, and you talk about that. You are in that that real authenticity and integrity of what you're saying. You can feel it, and I'm curious. This is like a big question, but some of the like key gems that you would say you've taken away from being a yoga instructor, but also practicing, getting to watch and be part of others' practice and this whole yogic journey, which you could think of as a spiritual journey. What are some of the greatest gems that have helped and changed your life? And how do you, well, let's start with that one before I ask you 5 questions.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm, raised in the evangelical tradition and I'm, love Jesus. I'm a Christian. That has often come at conflict sometimes with, with some people. But one of my biggest takeaways in the past couple of years around that has been that really embracing the fact that yoga is a spiritual discipline, just like prayer or meditation or fasting. And some people might be offended by me saying, that yoga doesn't belong to a religion, and yoga in of itself is not a religion. It's a spiritual discipline. And I'm so grateful I'm so grateful that it made its way to our shores. For me, my another piece of why I kind of chose to be a yoga teacher was that I was looking into doing master's programs. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to go on and get my master's or PhD in something, and specifically very, trauma related, helping people with trauma, and not necessarily being a therapist, but in education or helping there be more tools. And then reading The Body Keeps Score, yoga was one of the things that came up, and I'm like laughing to myself as I'm reading this book, because I'm like, well, duh, of course. Like, anytime that I hear a study or anything is supported, like for yoga, I'm like, well, yeah, like it's common sense. So, piecing those things together, of realizing how yoga, the other, like, kind of, not only is it this like spiritual discipline for all people and all time, it is also, it's one of the only ways in which we move our bodies and bring awareness to our breath at the same exact time. And therefore, it rewires your brain.
Yeah.
Like these more scientific things, the more I learn, the more my mind is blown. Like in even in yin, which is the fastest growing yoga format right now. It's not your traditional hatha, or it's only from the 70s. It was created by this super goofy guy, Paulie Zink. He's awesome. He's literally a monkey kung fu like master. It's called monkey kung fu or something. It's hilarious. He created this form because in the Western world, it was a very masculine, very intense yoga. And we needed this other energy. We needed this softer, more subtle, because it was so hard to get people to sit and meditate.
Yeah.
People didn't want to just sit and meditate. So Paulie Zink, using what he knew, and then some other great guys like Bernie Clark, who I just love. So here I teach very intense classes, and I love it, and I love pushing my students. But yin, to me, it's also that, like, how does an Ashtanga practice and a yin practice, how do these things both change what's happening and actually heal the body and the mind?
Yeah.
It heals it because we are bringing presence to body, we are bringing awareness to breath. And we so often, what I like to say is that, we kind of like to categorize when we're, especially people who are, good listeners here, or, people that are in this world, if you're working on your physical health, you're striving spiritually too. If you're working on spiritual and mental, body, you're also probably trying to like figure out how to get mentally more sharp and, all that. And then, you have the other aspect of like our heart and your relationships. So often we kind of, we treat those things as separate things. And I like to say, like, it's like 4 strings. Yoga, there is no separateness.
Yeah.
There's no separateness in your heart, your mind, your soul, or your physical body. It is all one. And that has probably been the thing that the biggest piece of why is yoga different? How does it do this? What is the mystery? That's it. It's not treating one thing at a time. It's treating the entire being, the soul, the body, the mind, the heart.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautifully said, Allie. And, I think at the deepest level, I feel like this is an ad for yoga, which is so funny because I whether or not you decide to do yoga, if you're listening, there's no judgment. It's just, I've experienced this firsthand after being in a lot of different types of movement experiences. What you're saying, I believe at the deepest level is also what we're craving, which is that feeling of unity, that feeling of oneness, of connectedness, that feeling of that one with ourselves, with God, with the divine, even with ourselves, and with the community. And kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with, encouraging, especially women, and encouraging others. I think one of the gravitational pulls to yoga and what it embodies, is what you just said. There's no place where you can't find your whole self there. It's a
Yeah.
holistic practice. And I think that it's also the seed for being able to have compassion, love, and shifting the way we even relate to others around us. And going from that place of competition to
Mm.
collaboration and contribution, which is so funny. That was the word, right? You had contribution, I had presence. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about. I love that. I love how those cards
Yeah.
they always work.
Yeah, it's so
They always
great.
work. They
I
always
love that I love these.
it's the divine through us, right? I'm like,
Yeah,
thank
right?
you, spirit.
Yeah.
But that is, I do think when, this is getting existential, but this idea of, creating greater peace in the world, in our communities. Of course, we know it starts with ourselves. And I believe yoga brings that. But the next piece is peace with each other. And
Oh, for
to me,
sure. There
yeah,
can't be this like separateness,
that's
you
right.
know, uh, and that is something that I'm very gentle with in class. I'm not heavy-handed with it because a lot of people, one of the what trauma does a lot of times is it makes, and this is something that it did in me and in my body, is that it makes us believe that we're better off alone.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what it does. And then you will start to subconsciously put yourself in situations where that's affirming. That, you know what, if I don't, like the famous saying, well, if you can't get it, if you want it done right, do it yourself. I am like that is a famous thing that I say internally to myself. And because I subconsciously put myself in these things where it then affirms this mechanism of separateness, of protection. And so a lot of that response, so I'm very light with that in class when I specifically talk about it. But I think that the truth is that yoga, the meaning of yoga, to connect, to yoke, it's to connect with ourselves, connect with the divine, and connect with everybody, with all living beings. And, in class, that means everyone in class with you. So the piece that I have to just say again, like with this open door thing, because there are definitely studios and people and places, it's not that every yoga teacher, has no ego or is going to be non-competitive. I mean, there's people are people, right? But I have been so blessed, so blessed that my teachers, Katie and Jen, Jen specifically, she left right when I came in.
Mm,
And it was one of these situations where her and I, there's no other way to describe it, but like this divine connection, this divine, like she was meant to be my teacher. Because at the time, here I was coming off building 2 businesses, and I needed a blueprint that I could just follow.
yeah.
I needed a voice. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the bandwidth to kind of find my voice as a teacher. But Jen and I were our personalities, our tone, like our spiritual lives were so similar that I felt like God just gave me this teacher that
Yeah.
I could just truly follow her footsteps. And then by happenstance, because when we started training, they didn't know they were moving.
Right.
And by again, this doors open for them, doors open for me.
Yeah.
And I was able to kind of step in where she had built this community. My Friday morning class that I teach, I mean, that was her class. So it
Yeah.
was also this like, oh my gosh, I'm taking over Jen's class. Like this, okay, I got to really rise to the occasion. And she just had so much faith in me and so much
Mm,
confidence in me. And her and Katie, their lack of like pride and ego, and women can also get very territorial. I mean, we've all experienced that. Um, it's they were such gracious teachers. They were so welcoming. They were so warm. There was no like amount of being territorial or any of that kind of stuff. And then it also taught me, when you have a teacher who can show you a posture of a heart
Mm.
I mean, it's profound. So their posture, their heart's posture, their countenance was something that I could follow. And therefore, like when I have had, new teachers come in, or like we had when we opened Annapolis, and Jasmine, who teaches at Annapolis, like all I could be was excited that she was there. Like that's all I had to give her was like humility, encouragement, believing in her, because that's what the teachers did before me.
Mm.
And so that's where it's like that legacy, I think, as women, I'm just at a stage in my life, and this might sound kind of harsh. And, I am an Enneagram 8. So if any listeners know the Enneagram, I am the challenger. I am a very blunt, direct person. I don't think a lot of my students know that about me, but I can be a bulldog, but I will say that I just don't have time for that. Like I don't have time for that energy, that attitude, the pride, the whatever. It's like, I don't want to, I'm not impressed by it. Like if there's a teacher who does know more than me and is more, but if they have that posture, I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Like that is not, it's not welcoming. It's not warm. And it also, one of the things that we do at Lifetime that a lot of studios don't do. So again, another plug for Lifetime and yoga, which I can't believe I've spent so much time doing that here, but I know, whoops, sorry. But, I do have my mat out a little bit sometimes, but I'm not modeling the whole time. And a lot of times when you walk into a studio, the teacher is, the mat's horizontal and the teacher's up there. And it's kind of this guru, like kind of this weird, and sometimes it can be weird. Like I've had friends who've gone to take yoga and they'll show up and the teacher will be in a handstand. It's like, how intimidating, like it's comical, but it's also like this happens, right? And Lifetime and Johnny Kest, who, created our curriculum and who's an amazing teacher, part of this is like removing ourselves from this, like, you are not answerable to me as you teaching my students that they are actually their own guru, they're their own teacher, that listening to their breath and their body is more important. That plays into all this. That's plays into all this stuff that we're talking about. And all of it's rooted in ego and attachment. And I would just love, and that's why I've loved like so much our time together, as short as it's been. Like it feels so good to just talk to someone who's so positive and encouraging and like sharing unashamedly also, because there's this other piece of there's another shadow of this, right? Where when you're a woman, like, and I know probably, Julie, you get this probably because you're so positive and so light. When you live in that, it triggers people. There are other women who would just be like, she's phony, or she's just always happy, or, they'll say things and you're like, what in the world? It's like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, But I love seeing women who it's like, I feel like you're similar to me, where you're just like, I don't have time for that.
That's right. Yeah. We're not going to do that today. We're just
like, I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to, live in my authentic voice and then share my light and share my heart with people. And I'm going to attract and to mentor and invite people into my personal space that also see and reflect that as well.
It's so beautiful, Allie. Before we wrap, what's coming to me is this calling forth of a new way of being, especially for women. So much of this is being modeled, and I don't mean modeled like by the posture, but modeled by your energy and by what we're talking about, your presence, one of the words. But it's really this coming from a place of grounded heart, of humility, of gracious loving, of acceptance. And I'm just going to say, because everyone, if you're listening, whether you're into yoga or not, first of all, I do recommend at least trying it. These principles, these are universal. And if you're leaning in, there's a part of you that knows this is the next evolution we're looking for, right? We always get to decide how we're being and what you're saying, what you experienced. I love Jen and I love
Yeah.
Katie. Funny, they were like, you should have done the teacher. They kept telling me to do the teacher training like years ago. I could have been with you, but that's okay. It all happens when it happens.
Yeah.
But this next level of women loving up, supporting, encouraging, lifting up other women. And I, as a female woman, identified as woman myself, I know, and I see this in you. And that's one of the reasons I'm like, we've got to do this, because I want to not just inspire, but motivate, like ignite the passion. If you're listening and it can feel crappy if you, that comparing, to compare, despair, putting people down, feeling not good enough. On the other end of it is feeling like, I don't look like that. I'm not like that. I'm not as successful. I don't have as much money. I mean, you go on and on. That's not what matters. How can you lift somebody else up, especially another woman? How can you do that?
Yeah. And it don't wait.
Don't wait.
Like, stop waiting. Stop waiting to share your story.
Yeah.
It's not going to be for everybody. That's okay.
That's right.
And like,
right.
I have to acknowledge, one thing I love, Jen addressed this in our training, and I totally took this to heart. It's like, you're not going to be the teacher for everyone.
That's
Not
right.
everyone's going to like you resonate with your voice.
Right.
And that's okay. Like, but your gifts and your abilities, whether you try yoga or not, or, even if it's just breath work and learning how to cultivate presence and learn how to, it's like our two words, contribution and presence, right? Cultivate your presence, whether that's using yoga to get there or breath work, meditation. There are so many wonderful tools now. And then contribution, your contribution, your light, your story, your gifts, your uniqueness, whether that's you're working in, marketing, like your sense of humor, your leadership, your uniqueness matters.
Yes.
And it's like, please see that, and please surround yourself with at least one or two people who see that as well, and that are doing those things, because it does take bravery. Like, it is, Brene Brown writes this in her book about, the wilderness, right? Braving the wilderness. This is kind of a wilderness for women. Like, this is a little bit of this wilderness. Like, you might feel alone a little bit in this journey, but every now and again, you'll meet a Julie, you'll meet a Jen, you'll meet someone who's like, hey, I'm in the wilderness too. Like, I'm doing this, and I see you, girl. And like, you got this. Or I see you, dude. Like, because I know men, a lot of time men, it's imposter syndrome, but it's like, so often we shrink our stories and we make our giftings small. And the truth is like, you are uniquely and beautifully and wonderfully made. Your light is important. Your love is important. Love the people that the universe, the God, who, whatever you want to call it, puts in your path. Love them well. And that includes yourself. Let's start with yourself.
Yes.
And then share. Like, that is, I mean, you know me, every time I teach, I'm like, let that light shine. And maybe today you don't want to share your light. That's okay. Then you turn it inwards, but that light is there. Just, I think women, oftentimes we cover it. We make it small. And it's like, you don't have to share your light right now. It's okay if you're hurting. It's okay if you're not ready. It's okay if it just feels too scary to do that. But at least start letting it burn a little brighter inside.
Oh, amen, girl. Preach it out. And I'm like, this is exactly the point of tapping into your Youest You, your higher self, your gifts. That's the whole, I'm like, it's all connected. I will just say, before we land this plane, although I could talk to you, Allie, I'm like, can y'all see why I love her classes? Like, thank you for saying yes to your gifts, your light, for allowing the doors opened. We don't always walk through them, right? That takes some courage and bravery. You have been walking through those doors. And I will say, to my beautiful listener, I'll say this now, Allie will be, because I know this for you, there's a book coming, there's speaking, there's more for you. I'm like, I know it. So I'm like, you'll be back and we're going to talk about this. And I just, it takes something to decide I'm not going to cover my light, or I'm going to shine it for myself, and I'm going to shine it to others. And I'm going to see that in others as well.
It's like what you said at the beginning, one person. Like I am in the process of a painful, long process of writing a book for moms.
Yeah.
And it's called Sitting in the Mess.
Nice.
And but it's not for everybody, and it takes a lot of courage to get that story out there. So, but you're an inspiration, Julie, and it's just funny how you came into my life before I actually met you. Isn't that crazy? Like your voice has been in my, like, I read your words and that's just so amazing. And so you having the courage and then you believing in me, I mean, it just means so much to me. And I think you and I could just fangirl all over each other all day long.
This is what we do every time I see her. I'm like, I love you. You're amazing. This is awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, and hey, you know what? May this be the new normal for women and for women, sisters and light workers, all of us. May this be our new normal where we fangirl, we love up on each other more consistently. I am all for it. And I am just grateful that I got to share you and your heart and your wisdom and your words with this beautiful, beautiful. I love my people so much. I love all these listeners. I get notes and I'm getting to know. Write in, let us know, like, what was your biggest takeaway here? Seriously, we'd love to hear. What was your heart flare? Because there's a lot here. There's a lot here. And I just thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being a gift.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, and I'm going to just say for you, beautiful, beloved listener, we love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sitting with yourself, for finding the light, for shining who your Youest You is. That is the goal. The more of us that do that, the more that we have peace, the more that we have love, the more that we shift consciousness and energy, the vibration of ourselves, of our families, of our communities, of our planet. So it brings me to tears. Thank you for being here with us today and for being part of this love fest. We love you as well. And here's to you being your Youest You. Namaste.
Namaste.
Hello, my friend. I just wanted to pop in here quickly to share with you about the Youest You intention cards. I use these often in my episodes. I actually use them often in my own practice. There are 33 cards. I have written them myself with all kinds of different intentions, readings, and then powerful questions to ask your Youest You. They can be used part of your morning practice. They could be used in a retreat that you're leading or that you're on, in a yoga class with your children, at the dinner table. If you're coaching somebody, there's a lot of ways to use these cards. I want to share with you that they all have a powerful intention and they're designed to help you become your Youest You, to love your Youest You. So if you're interested in getting these cards, just go to juliereisler.com/shop. You can find all about those cards there. We have a special if you buy more than one. And as always, I hope they will guide you back home to your Youest You.